Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined as always by Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we are rolling along in these NBA playoffs. We are looking at our best bets in this video for Friday night, April the 21st. We also have a player props video up for you with some player props in there for you. So make sure to check that out, like and subscribe to that page. Also head to thelines.com. We're throwing up all the picks on the site as well these days. And we have our odds finder tool on there. You can use that to make sure you're getting the best odds available to you on all these bets we're making in the postseason. We are going to roll right into this slate as we're recording on Thursday to get ahead of these lines with you guys. Nate, let's jump into your first best bet from one of these three games on Friday night.
Yeah, I've been taking the Celtics to win, but trying to tease it down. So I'm going Celtics -1 and under 232. And tried to hit that over in that game too. It was more high scoring, but Atlanta just could not come along for the ride. And really just looking at it, Atlanta's shit just does not work in the playoffs, man. It's like they're scoring 103 in their last 8 home playoff games. They have 111 or less in all of those. So I was also looking at them going under their total of 111.5 because Boston's defense is no joke. They outscored them 64-40 in the paint in game 2. John Collins looks completely out of rhythm. Clint Capella is a non-factor against the size Boston has down there. Trae Young also is struggling with a 109 offensive rating in the series. He's getting vastly outplayed by Derek White, who, 26 points per game, a 125 offensive rating versus Young's 98. It's just crazy how much depth the Celtics have and just how everybody they throw out there is a plus defender and a playmaker. And it's just a tight 8-man rotation where they can really just dominate. It's a terrible matchup for the Hawks. It's a really lucky draw for the Celtics that they did not get the Heat. And we expect them to win the series, whether it's going to be in 4 or 5. That's obviously the quick case for why they're going to win. But you look at them on the road before they got to the finals, they went 7-2 against the Eastern Conference. Those games only averaged 210. They had a 107 defensive rating, and they weren't particularly slow either. They were played at a 95 pace. Their last 12 playoff games overall, including the finals, 106 defensive rating. Those games are averaging just 202. And they did go under on the road more often. The one thing that gives you pause is Boston, down the stretch, they blew up. Their defensive rating was 10 points worse on the road. They had all these mental lapses. They did, yes. And then we remember when they just jumped Milwaukee in their second to last road game of the year, just absolutely pummeled them on both ends. Then they held the Sixers to 103, lost that game. But point is, I'm pretty comfortable with the under here. And obviously you should be comfortable with the Celtics to win, especially if you're going to tease down the spread. So I think putting the two together is a pretty safe teaser here. And got to shout out Malcolm Brogdon, 6th man of the year. Cash those futures bets, baby.
Yeah, shout out Malcolm Brogdon. Love him. Love the floor general. I was looking at some of his props when they go on the road here for the Celtics, sort of thinking he's kind of an adult in the room, no matter what for you. And he's someone that you definitely trust. I know Missoula trusts him. I know everybody on this team trusts him to be on the floor and handling things from a point guard standpoint at the end of games to kind of keep his guys in check as well. So probably he'll be on the floor. I would ask you as you're talking about your pick, when you tease it, is that more because you were scared that perhaps there's an overcoming in the sense that if the Celtics blow them out again and get 122 on their own, it's possible that this goes over? Or what's the thinking behind the teaser?
Yeah, it's a combination of that and that the Hawks could just be in the game right down to the wire, that the Celtics are not the same kind of blow you out the building team on the road.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so, I guess you might not want to necessarily take full advantage of a team total at that point, because the reason I even really ask is kind of thinking, well, do we just want to go with the Hawks under 111 or under 112 really to be able to get this? You actually get better odds for that, for them to go under the 112, which is something to consider as well. I think a big part of that is what you were talking about with Derek White just owning Trae Young so far in these two games, and a couple of times when they've played each other, and the way that Derek White has been defending. Everyone talks about Marcus Smart a lot, obviously won a Defensive Player of the Year at this point, but Derek White is probably their best option to guard point guards right now. now. It seems like those slithery, smaller guys like Trey, especially as he's moving his feet super well. He's a much bigger guard, gets blocks, as people in Boston love to talk about. Derek White does get a ton of blocks for guards, especially at his size and shorter. So yeah, I'm glad you found a way to bet on the Celtics. I was like, how do I do it? And I agree with you in the ways that you're talking about, to just continue to believe in them to handle this in a pretty small spread that I don't know that they'll necessarily lose focus. I think they're showing that they're on a mission. Obviously, playing away from home will be a little bit different, so we'll see. But either way, I'm going to move on to my first pick here, Nate, which is unfortunately, I'm kind of fading my Knickerbockers here in this Cleveland and Knicks game, but I'm just going to take an under on the game total at 211.5. And we loved an under in the last game in Cleveland. Maybe the fact that it's still at 211 after we saw a game go 97, what was it, 107-90 in this last one, under 200 points is the point here. Maybe it's still at 211.5 because one, it's the modern day NBA. And so like nobody that works for the books feels comfortable putting out a number that is closer to 200. It's going to be there by the next round of the playoffs. You got to believe, like, it just keeps getting grindier, if you will, and more so as you go on. So I would say, the recent history between these teams is going to trump, and the fact that it's the playoffs trumps any sort of numbers that you might look at with the Knicks and the way that they've played at home and scored at home. So in their last 10 games, they are averaging 122 points per game. In that time frame, there's just a litany of teams that either weren't trying or because they were already out of it, or it was at the end of the season they sat somebody. So let's just look at the games that actually mattered, where the Knicks came in and the other team came in trying to win. And the only really two examples, to be honest. You could throw the Nuggets out there. They were playing on a Sunday afternoon in the midst of a 6-game road trip and lost that game to the Knicks. Also went under, I would add, by the way. So another team that's trying. But even if you just look at these two Eastern Conference matchups in those last 10 at home, where it was the Celtics and the Heat that they played, those games averaged 105-93. Neither went over. Both teams were trying, because the Heat were still trying to overtake the Knicks actually or the Nets for the 6th seed. They failed obviously, but they did win that game against the Knicks actually. And then the other one was the Knicks playing the Celtics, and they won that one 104-93. With, I think they were missing one of the Jalen or Jasons. So basically, if you're in the situation with the Knicks and you have a solid defense and you're able to guard a one-on-one style of basketball, there's pretty good reason to believe that you're going to be able to do that. So the other thing I would throw out here is the Knicks in game one had 58 uncontested field goals, which is a lot. They didn't hit very many of them because they still can't really shoot that well outside of a couple guys, as you have continuously said this season. But in the second game, that wasn't even an option for them. They had 44 uncontested field goals. Part of that, and the main reason for that, was Jalen Brunson's inability to get separation from the much taller Karis LeVert, who played a ton more minutes in game two. In game one, he only played 18. In game two, he got up to 41 minutes because he spent the most amount of time guarding Jalen Brunson. Only gave up 4 points to JB in 8 minutes that he was the primary defender, which is a lot of time. When I say primary defender, he was lined up against him a lot. They tried to switch him off. It still didn't work. I'll shout out Cedi Osman, who did a decent job, much better than he did in game one, guarding Jalen Brunson, coming off screens and stuff like that. But there was a ton of help on him. He was not going to beat them in that game, and I got to believe that's going to be similar here. It's just, if he's not scoring close to 30 and Julius Randle's still hampered by that ankle, I don't expect them to score very much. But I do think that they can still limit what the Cavs are trying to do, as long as Darius Garland's not able to beat the crap out of RJ Barrett like he did in game two there when he was matched up with him, which I'll talk about in player props again here about RJ. But yeah, under 212 in this game, I'm definitely hitting that, and I feel pretty good that the Knicks offense is going to be stagnant enough to get us there.
Yeah, I mean, this is really dovetails with my pick, which is the Cavs to win, because you look at them in wins versus losses. They give up 101 in a win, and they give up 115 in losses. They do not want to play high-scoring games, right? But they do have the superior backcourt. They have the superior 1-2 punch with Julius Randle hurt. He admitted now his elbow hurts on top of the ankle because he took a hard fall. He's just been awful in this series. I mean, on high volume, too. Like 37% field goal, 11 turnovers, 5 assists, 88 offensive rating. I talked about how he had that one spike game in January against the Cavs. 8 for 12 from 3, 36 points. He was still a -10. The Knicks still lost that game by 2 because Donnie Mitchell, 8 assists. That's a big difference there. 17 assists in game 2. They're able to play off him. And Garland obviously going from passive to classy, from passy to classy. Yeah, let's do that again.
There you go.
Goes clean off,
Nailed it.
plus
Nailed it.
29. And then, yeah, Karis LeVert is the X factor. I mean, I would think it's obvious. I mean, I guess he's certainly not as good a defender as Isaac Okoro, but why are you playing 4-on-5 offensively when you have a fine fifth option to make this a decent offensive team? And like, he was starting to ramp up towards the end of the regular season, and then all of a sudden he loses favor with Bickerstaff. But I mean, clearly he can score against this team. He also had 15 in that high scoring game in March, but I guess yeah, he could contribute more to an over here if the Cavs offense is actually cooking. But like you mentioned, yeah, they switched up their defenses. They were able to limit Brunson. And the fact is just the Knicks don't have anything around Brunson that really scares you. Yeah, I think even if Randall was healthy, this is just a really bad matchup for them against Mobley. Yeah, and when you were going through all these like game by game, here's what the Knicks did. I'll just simplify it. Under an 8 of their last 10 at home against teams that are above 500. I'm not counting the Brooklyn Nets, who are below 500 since the trade. So basically, against good teams, they're not really going over. So yeah, I'll continue to take unders in this series, and I'm gonna take the Cavs here in Game 3.
I was definitely trying to say it as simply as that, but I thought I'd take the people through it a little bit. What's the point of making this content otherwise? No, but I would agree with you as well. I mean, look, I'm not ready. I'm definitely not betting against the Knicks to win this game because of how bad I want them to win. I don't need that type of conflict in my life while I'm watching this game on Friday. But I will say that, yeah, I mean, I won't leave everything for the RJ Barrett under that I'll go ahead and foreshadow here in the other video, because I'll say a few of the things right now that contribute to this, which is RJ Barrett has been absolutely putrid in this series, and I guess he's a little bit better at home. He's 1 point better per game at home over the course of his career and this season as well. So maybe there's something there for that. But the start to his playoff career has been awful, including these two games, shooting 24% from the field, 12% from three in 32 minutes per game. Like, how can you play him 32 minutes if he can't hit the Bronx side of a barn and he's he's continuing to shoot the ball 12 times per game and you're guaranteeing that he's going to miss like 8 to 10 of them. At this point, I don't know that you can keep him in the game that long, and that will probably help their offense, their defense if he's off the floor, because Emmanuel Quickley's been much better at defending Darius Garland this season and in these first two games than RJ Barrett, and maybe you get him back out there to try to get some offense for the Knicks, who are going to be struggling to find it. So I'm going to close things out in this video here, Nate, with my second pick for the best bet, and I'm going with a fun one in the Minnesota-Denver game. And the reason is because I'd like, the obvious thing that you pick here in a game 3 where a team is down 2-0 is for them to come out hot. So Minnesota, I'm in the first quarter, I'm looking for them to come out strong. So I'm going to add that bet to the Denver money line, which is a prop that you can get there on DraftKings at plus 450 for Minnesota to be winning at the end of the first quarter and lose this game when all is said and done. So I don't know necessarily about the second quarter. So far, Denver has outscored them by more than 25 points in their last 3 games. In the third quarter, they seem to own that one. And excuse me, not the last 3, the prior to that last game. Last game, they let them in. They fell asleep in the third quarter. Prior to that, in the last 3 games, they had outscored them in the third. But then they pulled it together in the fourth. I think it's actually good that Denver pulled it together in the fourth for this bet, because I do think that allows them to come back out a little bit more lax. I think the sort of scare that the losing by 17 points in the third quarter of this game 2, I think the scare that put into them is probably enough, was something that they took care of in the fourth quarter by then outscoring the T-Wolves by 11 to win that game again by 9 and still feel pretty comfortable, as they come into this one and go, okay, well, we're on the road. There's no way I think they come out with the intensity that the T-Wolves are going to bring in this one in the first quarter. Both teams were really good in the first quarter during the regular season. The T-Wolves were actually a little bit better. They won the first quarter by an average of 2 points per game. They were the second highest scoring team in the first quarter. Just whatever that does for you. I know there's a lot of variance there, and it's an 82 game season. So many different things could have been, the reasons for a ton of it, but it just at least shows that they have the capability of coming out and putting up 30 in the first quarter and actually having the focus to do so. And I do think that they have a chip on their shoulder to come and do that. That's going to be the case anytime you're down 2-0 like this. We just saw it in that Philly game as we were, before we started recording this. Philly and Brooklyn were playing. Brooklyn comes out, brings it to Philly right away. Can't score at the end of the first quarter, but was on pace to win that quarter really easily. So I'm much better offensive team there in Minnesota anyway than in Brooklyn right now. So I think there's a good reason to think that they can win that first quarter, but I definitely don't trust them to hold the lead against Jamal Murray and playoff Jamal Murray specifically.
Yeah, I think if you're going to bet this, you should also just bet Minnesota to win the first quarter. It must be even money, right? And then hedge it, then try to juice it with this extra plus 450, because I don't know if Denver's going to come back and win the game. Like, I want to see Denver on the road in the playoffs before I make any conclusions. Like, clearly they came out like gangbusters with playing the disrespect card and crushed at home. Their offense can lapse on the road. Their defense certainly lapsed, though. So I am looking at over for this game in general at 223. They've gone over in 5 of their last 7, the Nuggets in the playoffs. And if their defense is going to lapse, like I still trust their offense. We're both liking Joker and Murray to continue doing what they're doing. So it makes sense to look at an over here on top of what you're saying here.
It does, yeah. And I mean, there was some stuff that we were looking at that was like Minnesota's good at defense at home, and they are, but they still give up 116 points per game at home, which is what they give up on the road as well. So they give up 1.5 points more on the road than they do at home. Whatever, they're still not that great. So I think there's going to be some points there. Another foreshadow for a guy that I like in player props in terms of Jamal Murray. So make sure to like and subscribe to that page. Continue to follow along. Check that out. The other video that we have up for you on Friday night as well with our player props. And until we see you next, happy betting.